back from the depths of hell once again to go ahead and give Atlanta their third win of the season on
Mhm.
3 now game-winning drives for the Atlanta Falcons. But before we get into that game, Mr. Dells,
Drew,
how are you doing
try
tonight?
unplugging your mic. I don't know. This might just be me, but you're very choppy to start off. If anyone's
Okay.
listening in the comments, let me know. This could just be me, my AirPods are messing up or something. But it was very choppy. Anyhow, though, we're about to get into this Thursday night football game. Once you're good, Drew, let me know. You could hop back in. You're muted. Here we go. Great start to the stream.
Did he?
Say it again.
Does it sound bad?
B Swag, what up? I don't think your mic's connected right now. Sounds good. All right. Good.
All right, so we'll run that back from the top. Of course, live production. I absolutely love stuff like this. But hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Joel Dells. We are here after Thursday Night Football, a thrilling game where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose a heartbreaking game to the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons just know how to win a close game. Now their third game-winning drive from Kirk Cousins. They go and they win this game 36-30. Before we get into that game, Mr. Dells, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good, doing great. This was a just sensational game. I mean, just fantastic game. First of all, shout out to the New York Mets for really coming home today and taking care of business. That's why I got the blue right here in the background. But awesome NFL game as well. I'll be honest, Drew. I saw like the fourth quarter. Beyond that, I was locked into the Mets this first half. I saw maybe 2 or 3 plays, but the fourth quarter and overtime, this game was just sensational. Really, all I had to catch. But yeah, man, great night of sports. Excited to get into this.
Let me tell you what, I completely understand not watching this Thursday night football game for the New York Mets. I've been vocal about it. There are very few teams that are as fun to watch as the New York Mets. And in typical Mets fashion, at least 2024 Mets fashion, the ninth inning, game on the line, they go ahead and they hit. Pete Alonso goes and has his signature moment as a New York Met to move them on to the NLDS. An unbelievably great game, 0-0 for a majority of it. And then, of course, you have the 2 back-to-back home runs from Milwaukee as soon as you take Quintana out. And then in the ninth inning, the Mets just being the Mets, putting on 4 runs to go ahead and steal one. But talking about stealing one, this game tonight, the Atlanta Falcons were dead to rights. The Buccaneers had not just one opportunity, but 2 opportunities to go ahead and put this game away. Bucky Irving fumbles the ball, and then they go 3 and out the very next drive after. We watched the Buccaneers get a little conservative, in my opinion. And then Atlanta, the way that Kirk Cousins was passing the football, you gave him another opportunity to potentially get into field goal range, which, of course, especially in these late game situations, he's going to go ahead and do that. And Younghoe Koo, who struggled early on, pulled 2 field goals left. I say 2 because one got called back, or one didn't count because there was an offside. And then Younghoe Koo goes and still pulls it left again, then has another field goal block later in the game, stays strong. In the clutch, 1 second left on the clock, 50-yarder, doesn't matter. He still drills it right through the uprights to send them into overtime. Then Kirk Cousins gets the ball. The rest is history. 42 of 58, 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 INT. And that 1 INT, that was in the clutch as well, Joel. I'm assuming you watched that part where
Yeah.
Levante David goes and cuts the route. You'd think that the Buccaneers have this game, but no, because shout out to I don't want to mispronounce his name. Was it Kadarrell Hodge? He goes and gets his second career touchdown in the biggest moment of his life up until this point. He goes for 2 catches, 67 yards, a nice play for a touchdown to win them the ball game. But to me, the star of the show, outside of course, Kirk Cousins, is Drake London. 12 catches on 13 targets, 154 yards, and a touchdown. I got to give some love to Darnell Mooney, of course. How could I? How could I not? 9 catches, 16 targets, 105 yards, and a touchdown in his own right. The funny thing about this is, as soon as I tweet the reel I've always known about Darnell Mooney, he has a catastrophically bad drop that ends up being one of the plays that could have been the reason the Falcons end up losing this game. But Kirk had his back. The rest of the Falcons had his back, still trusted in him, and he had himself awesome ball games. This was a pretty offensive heavy game because on the opposite side, you had Baker Mayfield go and ball out pretty efficient game. Didn't feel like he had to do much. 180 yards, 3 touchdowns. Was pretty mobile. 6 carries, 42 yards. You had Rashad White have that nice 50-yard rush. He had 72 yards on the day on 10 carries, so a majority of his production came in that regard. Bucky Irving, who looked solid in that last drive right before he fumbled, unfortunately, 9 carries, 44 yards. And, of course, the big fumble that he had. Mike Evans, being Mike Evans, gets his 100th career touchdown reception. He goes and brings in 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. Chris Godwin, I feel like this was a milder Chris Godwin game, especially with what he's been putting forward recently. He goes for 5 catches, 6 targets, 64 yards. Sterling Shepard gets into the end zone. That's really nice for him. Of course, he's been coming back from injury. So the big story of this game is offense. But Atlanta is going to steal the story away from the Buccaneers because they win their 3rd game in a situation where realistically they should not win the ball game. Versus the Eagles, depths of hell, 3 plays in field goal range. They go and they score a touchdown. Last week against the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Saints go and they score their touchdown. The Falcons need a couple of plays to get into field goal range. A DPI called on Darnell Mooney. They go and they get into field goal range. Younghoe Koo from 58, they end up winning the game. And tonight, from the depths of hell, Younghoe Koo sends them to overtime. And then, of course, the rest is history when Hodge goes and scores that touchdown. Are the Falcons a team to beat in the NFC South, Mr. Dells?
They might be. It feels like every week it's a new team, right? To start the year was the Saints, then the Bucs get hot. Now the Falcons are here. I think really, the defense is still very questionable. They have absolutely no pass rush, but this offense showed up today, which was great to see. I think really the biggest story here, shout out to Drake London, right? He's last month season, 2.55 yards per route run, one of the elite numbers in the NFL. Darnell Mooney is entering one of the best flex options week to week over these last 3 weeks. He has given you wide receiver 2 production for someone that was probably drafted in the last round, if not undrafted in a majority of leagues. But I think the number one thing really coming out of this game is Atlanta scores 36 points. They're going up and down the field the whole game. And Bijan Robinson has 12 carries for 61 yards through the air, 3 catches for 16 yards. This was a guy that was drafted within your top 3 to 5 draft picks in the first round. And he's been terrible, right? He hasn't been, Tyreek Hill because he's got an injury to his quarterback. He hasn't been CMC who hasn't played. But for a guy who is healthy and has not had any major injury to either himself or to his quarterback, he's been the biggest bust in fantasy football. This is a guy that hasn't finished within the top 15 so far through 5 weeks in the season. When you look at his red zone carries, he only has 3 carries within the 10, 3 carries within the 5. That ranks within the 30s and 40s amongst running backs. So he's not getting utilized there. Through the air, he has 2 games of 5 targets, but the other games are 4 or fewer targets. He just hasn't been effective. And this game kind of shocked me because Tyler Algier was getting way too much work in that fourth quarter, right? Tyler Algier did not have it going today. I was adamant last episode, listen, there are games where Algier should be involved because he's a good running back in his own right? Coming into this game, he was averaging over 5 yards per carry on the season. But this game, Algier didn't have it. It was the Bijan show, averaging over 5 yards carry, 12 carries, 61 yards. But for whatever reason, Raheem Morris wanted to run Tyler Algier in the fourth quarter there. A bit of a head scratcher. But to me, it's concerning, right? Like I said last episode, I would be trying to sell the name value on Bijan Robinson right now if you can. Rest of season, him or James Cook, him or Kyron Williams. I think those are 2 guys I would rather have than Bijan Robinson. And they were taking 1, 2, 3, 4, rounds before in your fantasy football draft. So right now he's scary for fantasy managers because you have to put him in your lineup and you're expecting top 5 production from him. But right now, he should probably be viewed more as an RB2 than someone who's going to be this top 3 league-winning running back because he just hasn't given you those numbers.
What's wicked about it is understanding when he has the ball in his hands, you're always expecting something big to happen. And I saw it in today's game where he had, of course, limited opportunity, but there were some moments where this is Bijan Robinson. We know what he is, and he's showing it to us, and he's simply not getting the amount of opportunity that we were anticipating coming in. Now, we knew that this offense had a lot of firepower. We expected Drake London, of course, Kyle Pitts, who I'd be remiss if I didn't give him his love. Of course, all the clips of me shit talking him and he goes 7 for 88. A lot of that came on that first play where he goes for 32 yards. I got to give some love to what happened tonight with Atlanta. A big thing for them. We've been waiting for their offense to have that big explosion, and of course, Bijan Robinson is the odd man out of this conversation. But to me, it's a fair way to talk about the Falcons in terms of it's a fair way to talk about Bijan Robinson. He goes and he barely gives you double digits tonight, 10.7 fantasy points, and again, 12 carries. This isn't something that you're happy about. But where I find myself, maybe it's to my own detriment, but this Atlanta Falcons took a step in the right direction offensively. Are the Bucs a bad defense after tonight? Maybe we can talk about that. But you look at how awesome this offense looked tonight. To me, I would feel optimistic as a Bijan Robinson owner. Now, that's me really looking at the glass half full. Their offense is finally figuring it out. Kirk Cousins looks comfortable again. Drake London finally had his blow-up game. Darnell Mooney continues, like you mentioned, to be the strongest flex in fantasy football. Does Kyle Pitts now have some life? Bijan Robinson is the only guy that we're here not talking. It's inevitable. You see when the ball is in his hands, he has the explosiveness to him. He has the shiftiness. He's still he was very efficient on the ground today, still averaged over 5 a carry. I'm staying hopeful. And I am a Bijan manager. I have him in multiple fantasy leagues. I can't find myself, I can't convince myself to trade him away because there's no package right now that I can sit with and think, damn, did I really whiff this bad on my first or late or early second round pick? That's kind of where I'm at. And maybe it's me being hard-headed, but I respect where you're coming from, but understand the Falcons have been trending in the right direction. And again, it's fair that it's taken them a little bit longer, but today was a huge step in the right direction.
Would you, if someone offered you James Cook and Brian Thomas,
No.
would you rather have Bijan or that package?
I think I'm being hard-headed. Oh, the James Cook and Brian is intriguing. It really is. That's a good package, actually. I'm not going to lie. That's a really good package.
So, okay, before maybe we don't do that. Let me just list off some running backs. You tell me if you'd rather have this running back or Bijan rest of the season.
Okay.
See where he falls. Bijan or Alvin Kamara?
Alvin Kamara is the best player in fantasy football right now. I'll go AK.
I would also go AK. Bijan or Saquon?
Saquon.
Saquon too. Bijan or Derrick Henry?
Derrick.
Me too. Kyron Williams?
This is still the conversation.
I'd go.
I get it. I think I'm still leaning Bijan.
Okay. Jordan Mason.
Jordan.
Jonathan Taylor.
I'm still with Bijan.
I'd probably go with Bijan just because that ankle injury. Yep. Jahmyr Gibbs.
Bijan.
Okay. Probably lean Gibbs there. It's close. Aaron Jones.
I'd say Bijan over Gibbs because Monty will always be the annoying bee buzzing behind him.
Not as big of a piece, but yeah, he has a role.
I agree. And that's a fair statement. What was the next name you said? I apologize.
Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones is a hell of a ball player, especially in that offense. That one's really surprisingly tough for me. I'll lean Bijan, but I respect Aaron Jones.
Yeah, I'd probably go Bijan just because Aaron Jones' injury history, 29 years old, bit worried if he stays healthy for a full season. James Cook.
I still go Bijan. You can have games like you had on last Sunday night when they're playing against the Ravens. That can just happen. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, he wasn't that great against the Jaguars either, just because they were so dominant. Or unless I feel like I'm missing a game.
Yeah, he was against Jacksonville. He was good. Yeah, he was RB11. He had
then maybe I'm solely thinking about the game versus the Ravens, of course. But it's James Cook. James Cook in that offense is going to be awesome. I would still lean Bijan. I'm surprised they're not incorporating him as much as a pass catching back either. But I still take Bijan in this situation.
Last name, Breece Hall.
One thing about Breece, man, it may be ugly. He's getting his double-digit fantasy points outside of last week versus the Broncos. I still find myself taking Breece. I think better days are to come for Breece also, but of course you have to respect Bijan too.
Yeah, I would take Breece. It's fun exercise because we're 4 weeks, 5 weeks into the season now, so we have a pretty decent sample size of like what it is. So we're looking at guys like Kyron Williams, for example, right? It's like you pause there. But you see what Kyron Williams has done. He's been a top 5 running back, right? He's scoring touchdowns. Like has a 3 touchdown game already. He's been utilized a lot more often than Bijan has. So listen, he's someone that you're going to start every week. He's probably going to finish the top 10 running back. I just think he'll probably be closer to 10 than he will, 3.
Last thing I'll say on Bijan, and I understand that it hasn't been what we're anticipating. We're expecting 20, 30-point performances, especially with the talent that he has. Every week he's had double digits. Is it ugly?
The floor is
Yes.
super safe.
In full PPR, every week, double digits. And even on this week, where he gives you 10 flat, to me, I know that in my first round, second round picks, what I want is a guy that can give me 20. But how I kind of go into every week is, hey, you give me double-digit points. Yes, if you are my upper echelon guy, I want you to give me 15, 20. But if you give me double-digit points, I can't be overly upset at you. Every single week in PPR leagues, he's giving you double digits. It's not what we really want yet, but I feel like it's inevitable. Next week, he has Carolina, Seattle. We saw what Jahmyr Gibbs and Monty were able to do. Tampa Bay again. Then you have Dallas, who has one of the worst rush defenses in the league. New Orleans, you got to respect always, but of course, Bijan is still capable of putting together a firm performance. He did just have double digits against them last week. So there's still a path and still optimism for me, especially looking at this schedule.
Yeah, that's a good point. The schedule does line up.
All right, so let's move on from this conversation, unless you want to have some conversations about the Bucs, because Baker Mayfield is a touchdown demon, 3 touchdowns again. Mike Evans, still one of the best one of the more reliable fantasy plays. You tried to tell me, I ignored you. I didn't think that the touchdowns would be sustainable again this late into his career. He continues to show the world that he's one of the all-time greats. So I think that's something that you anticipate with this backfield. I think that's the only thing I want to touch on. It's looking 50-50 more and more as the weeks go on. The Buccaneers are understanding Bucky Irving is a better running back, like a pure rusher than Rachaad White. Rachaad White is always going to be there because he's an amazing receiving back. And I think that for that purpose, if you are a Bucky Irving manager and if you are a Rachaad White manager, you have to know these two are always going to collide and these two are always going to impact each other's fantasy output. It's not an ideal situation for fantasy managers, but if I'm a Rachaad White manager, I can feel a little bit more optimistic knowing that my guy's going to be on the field because he's an amazing pass catcher.
Yeah, it seems like at this point, they're probably just going to eat into each other's work more than one of them taking a full-time role from the other, right? Like I had to start Bucky in one league where I just had a couple buys, had an injury, so I had to play Bucky. I wasn't really excited for it, but he's someone that week to week is someone, that's a flex-worthy type running back. But right now, Rachaad White did get banged up at the end of this game, so something to monitor. Of course, if one of these guys goes down, the other one takes a huge uptick, and we're talking about a top 10, top 12 type of fantasy running back. But for right now, they're probably both kind of in that RB2, RB3 mix with neither of them having a real true ceiling just because both are so involved.
So let's move on to our starts and sits of week 5. I'll start us off, Mr. Dels. I'll go with my start of the week. Not a name that people are very excited about moving forward. However, I'm firing him up. Trevor Lawrence versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to fantasy quarterbacks. And listen, I get it. Trevor Lawrence has not been good. And that's just the truth. But we spoke about it today on our Pick'ems episode. You want to talk about being due, that's the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. And going up against the Indianapolis Colts, to me, there's no better matchup for him to go and do that up against. You see the way that Brian Thomas has been playing. I see the way that Christian Kirk has been playing. That really excites me. He's been one of the best at getting open and creating separation. It's looking as if Evan Ingram can make a return this week. That's obviously going to give the offense a big boost. And going up against one of the league's worst defenses, I really love the Trevor Lawrence play.
Yeah, I surprisingly said the week multiple times. I do like that play as well. But my start of the week is going to be Justin Fields going up against the Dallas Cowboys. He's starting to cook recently. Last 2 weeks, RB12 against the Chargers, who were one of the best defenses in football entering that game. Then the quarterback won overall against the Indianapolis Colts. This week, going up against the Dallas Cowboys, Derek Carr, we know, went off against them early in the season. Lamar Jackson went crazy, including 87 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. So they are susceptible to the quarterback run game. And even though Daniel Jones didn't have a great fantasy day, he still had 280 passing yards. This Giants team was really able to move the ball up and down the field. They had these super long sustaining drives, just weren't able to get into the end zone. So Dallas's defense, it's not what the defense was last season. This is a defense that can get beat. And Justin Fields is starting to show week after week. He's getting a little more comfortable in this offense. The legs are starting to get more involved, had another rushing touchdown. So I love him this week going against Dallas.
My quarterback sit of the week is going to be Mr. Andy Dalton. Now, of course, this isn't a sexy play. This isn't a sexy name. But, hey, Andy Dalton these last couple of weeks has given some solid fantasy performances. 24 fantasy points and 16 fantasy points, respectively, against the Raiders and against the Bengals. And going up against Chicago Bears, who allow the second fewest just to the New York Jets, the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Andy Dalton has been awesome. He's been letting it go. I really respect this Bears defense. You see what they've done to Anthony Richardson. You saw how uncomfortable they made Matthew Stafford. CJ Stroud also looked wildly uncomfortable in their matchup in week 2. I just don't love this play going into this week. And I'm excited about it because Deontay Johnson has some life so long as Andy Dalton is throwing him the football. But just this week, I know those people in 2 quarterback leagues who were ecstatic to have Andy Dalton on their squad. This is one of those weeks where I'm not excited.
I said the week's going to be Patrick Mahomes going up against New Orleans Saints. Mahomes isn't an elite fantasy quarterback. He might not even be a good fantasy quarterback, right? Coming into the season, we had him as a top 3-5 quarterback because of all of the weapons, the possibilities, getting this explosive offense back with Hollywood and Xavier Worthy and Rasheed and all these guys. But the truth is, this team is super injured. We already know, of course, Hollywood's out for the year. Rasheed Rice is going to miss 4+ weeks. Patrick Mahomes, hasn't scored 20 fantasy points since week 12 of last season. He hasn't scored more than 18 fantasy points at all this season. On top of that, Saints defense has been great against opposing quarterbacks. They're allowing the 4th fewest points in fantasy. Shut down Dak Prescott, shut down Jalen Hurts, shut down Kirk Cousins. They've allowed just 1 passing touchdown, and they have 6 interceptions on the season so far. So if Mahomes had all of his guys and his weapons were out there, sure, fire him up. But right now, I mean, we have a nearly 10, 12 game sample size of Patrick Mahomes not being that good for fantasy. So in 2 quarterback leagues, of course, you don't really have much of an option. You're going to start Patrick Mahomes, especially because you took him in the first round. But in those 1 quarterback leagues, when there's other options on the waiver wire, like I don't know if Justin Fields is still there, but when you have a Justin Fields, when you have a Geno Smith, guys who have high passing volume offenses against good opponents, those are guys I'd be looking to start over Patrick Mahomes this week.
Listen, you know me, when it comes to talking about Patrick Mahomes, I'm here for a good hate watch. So listen, you as your sit of the week, I'm right there with you, brother. Now let's move on to our running back starts of the week. Now, a guy who we've been vocal about, I don't like him. We used to love him, but now I don't like him for what he has unfortunately done for us. He starts the season, 3 finishes, 38th, 42, 43rd. What does he do this past week? Of course, going up against the Rams ends up being a great matchup. Of course, I have to recognize that. DeAndre Swift goes and finishes as your RB3, goes and rushes for 93 yards, brings in 7 catches for 77 yards. And this matchup, going up against the Panthers, who allow the 2nd most points to fantasy running backs, it's a no-brainer. And if you guys were smart, you held on to him for 1 more week. You go and now you reap the rewards of him going up against the Carolina Panthers. Then you use him perfectly as trade bait in a nice trade to go and potentially upgrade at your running back position. But this may be the last week that you're able to wreak any type of reward off of him. So enjoy this week. Definitely my start.
I'm starting the guy or going against the team that DeAndre Swift just killed. Los Angeles Rams play the Green Bay Packers this week, and I think this is the week Josh Jacobs finally comes through for fantasy managers, finds the end zone, finishes a top 12 running back. The last couple of weeks have been pretty brutal for Jacobs, RB 44 and 25. But when we think about the context there, 1 game was with Malik Willis, and a game that I got to credit, Emmanuel Wilson just looked better than Josh Jacobs in that game. He had a receiving touchdown as well. And then last week's game going up against the Vikings, that was a game that got down early, right? This is first quarter, you're down multiple scores, so they had to play catch up. Was only able to get about 9 carries in that game. But even still, Jacobs saw 6 targets, averaged 5.7 on the ground. So he's still being an efficient running back and being utilized in the passing game, which we love to see. And you just mentioned it, the Los Angeles Rams. They just let DeAndre Swift go for 150 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. If you're allowing that to DeAndre Swift, I could only imagine what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs this week. So this feels like the week he finally gets back on track. This really for the whole offense. We talked about on the pickup, Dontavian Wicks, Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, of course. All of these guys feel like a great spot for the Rams this week, and just a spot for the Packers offense as a whole to get right.
If it was me, I would have made every single Packer a start of the week, no doubt. Josh Jacobs was definitely one that came to mind. But my running back sit of the week is a funny one because he actually has a great matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys. I'm talking about Najee Harris. The Cowboys allow the third most fantasy points to running backs. A lot of that is catered off, of course, Derrick Henry going berserk. Now, you had Alvin Kamara go crazy against them in week 2. However, Najee Harris last week going up against the Indianapolis Colts, we thought it would be a solid matchup. He goes for 13 carries, 19 yards, finishes at the RB 35. His finishes this year, 31, 28, 24, 35. He's not lacking opportunity. He's had outside of last week, he's had over 17 attempts in every game. 20 attempts in week 1, went for 70 yards, 3.5 a carry. Week 2, 17 for 69, 4.1 a carry. 18 for 70, 3.9 a carry. And last week, 1.5 a carry. Najee Harris is not a good running back. And I understand that this matchup is good. I'm sorry. I don't care. I don't like this matchup. You mentioned Justin Fields. I'm moved by that. I definitely can see him having a solid game. George Pickens, he can have himself an awesome ball game. Najee Harris, to me, just doesn't move me any which way. I don't think Najee Harris is a solid running back. I don't even think that he's an average running back. But, if you guys have to, and you feel like the match was good for you, that's your decision to make. To me, I want nothing to do with Najee in a lineup.
My running backs of the week is going to be Chase Brown going up against the Baltimore Ravens. He had an all-time game last week against the Panthers, but it is the Panthers, right? The Ravens are a different story. They held Isaiah Pacheco in check week 1. James Cook, we just mentioned, going against the Ravens, had his worst game of his season with less than 6 fantasy points. And it was great for Chase Brown. Got in the end zone a couple of times, but Zach Moss is still the RB1 in this team. He's the one playing 60+% of snaps all of these weeks. He's the one that's been more involved in the passing game, 15 targets to Chase Brown's 9. I do think there are going to be weeks going forward where Chase Brown is utilized, right? He has shown to be a shifty, explosive running back and a really good pairing to Zach Moss. But going up against the Baltimore Ravens, who have been one of the best defenses going up against fantasy running backs, this isn't the week I'm putting Moss in my lineup, or excuse me, Brown in my lineup.
Chase, I respect that. Listen, I was one of those guys that was actively trying to snag Chase Brown off the waiver wire. I've been seeing what's going on with that Cincinnati Bengals rush offense. It's been pretty efficient, pretty effective, but I'm with you. This is one of those matchups. I'm going to stay away 1 week and move forward with my Cincinnati Bengals running back, but it's all right to make sure you get your guy and you don't have to start him right away. I definitely feel you there. My wide receiver start of the week. It's time. Fire him up. We drafted him. The smart guys drafted him. The guys that were kind of late to the party had to spend 20 to maybe 30% of fab on Mr. Dontavian Wicks. Going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who give up the 6th most points to fantasy wide receivers. You saw it last week. The opportunity was there. 12 targets. Only brought in 5 catches, but that still was that was good enough for him. Excuse me, I was wrong about 12 targets. 13 targets. 5 catches. I watched Dontavian Wicks drop the ball often last week. Still had 78 yards, still had 2 touchdowns. Jordan Love trusted him. He kept throwing to him, and eventually it paid off for him where he still was able to get into the end zone multiple times. With Christian Watson being banged up, you know that Dontavian Wicks is going to still get the ball a good amount of times. This is a pass-heavy offense. And Joel mentioned his start of the week was Josh Jacobs. I would have made Jordan Love my start of the week, Josh Jacobs my start of the week, Dontavian Wicks my start of the week, Tucker Kraft my start of the week. It could be that type of performance for Green Bay. That offense is simply too explosive, too awesome, and Dontavian Wicks is going to be my start of the week.
Yeah, and listen, credit to you because you held on to Wicks those first 3 weeks. I went back, because I was going to pick him up, and I was like, no way Drew held on to this guy putting up 2 points, 3 points, 0 points. But now he looks like a great start. I see in the chat, shout out to who's this DB2EZ. He's saying, do I start Wicks over Zay Flowers and Garrett Wilson? Yeah, probably. Right? That's Zay Flowers. That's been someone who had a couple of good weeks, but has been really irrelevant. And Garrett Wilson, that's a bit tougher for me, but I mean, Dontavian Wicks with this role looks like he's set to smash. My wide receiver start of the week is going to be Brian Thomas going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Brian Thomas had a bit of a mini breakout, I would say, last week, right? He had 80 yards, had the touchdown. But it's really how he's been utilized, right? Weeks 1 through 2, 1 and 2, he had 8 targets, 4 apiece. Weeks 3 and 4, he's at 18 targets, 9 in each of those last 2 weeks. And the Indianapolis Colts have been getting destroyed by these outside X wide receivers. George Pickens just put up 7 catches for 113 yards. Roma Dunze, a couple weeks ago, 6 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown. Nico Collins is Nico Collins. He went out there, put up 6 catches for 117 yards. Right now, there's no one on the Colts that can guard outside wide receivers. There's really no one on the Colts that can guard anybody. I am interested to see, with Evan Ingram back in this offense potentially, how that changes. Will Brian Thomas continue to get, 7 to 10 targets potentially? But we have seen over the past couple of years that Ingram most frequently impacts Christian Kirk. So I do think the X wide receiver in this offense is still pretty safe, and it should be a great matchup for Brian Thomas to hopefully get his first 100-yard game of his career.
You and I are on the same page with Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas would have been my start of the week also. The matchup's going to be beautiful for him. And you want to talk about, we already spoke about it. That's the Jaguars. And Brian Thomas, week in, week out, continues to get slightly better every single time he's on that ball field. And this is just going to be one of those weeks where I think we see the Jacksonville Jaguars put it all together. Now, I just took a look. Shout out to Joel. He put up the chart, the throw chart for Kirk Cousins in this game. Yes. Wait till you take a look at that thing.
I saw it.
Oh my God. It's beautiful. He really is a legend. He's a demon. And I think he needs more love than what people give him. I digress. Let's move on. Let's move on to my wide receiver sit of the week. Miami wide receivers. Don't want anything to do with them. I'm going to take that cop out every single week. I promise you, I do not care. The New England Patriots give up points to the wide receiver too. That doesn't matter to me. I don't care. If Tua Tagovailoa is not the quarterback, I'm not starting Waddle. I don't feel great about starting Tyreek. I kind of have to because he's Tyreek Hill and he's always a play away. You saw that last week when Tyler Huntley underthrew him. That would have been a touchdown. He had a bomb play over the top, wide open, had multiple steps on a defender. Doesn't get thrown, doesn't get the completion, overthrown. Without Tua, this offense is a mess. And Miami, unfortunately, they do know that. And until they come back, fantasy managers will continue to be in hell. But until Tua comes back, I'm sorry. No Waddle, no Tyreek.
So let's just get gross for a second. Starting Dontayvion Wicks over both of them.
Send it.
Starting Brian Thomas over both of them.
Send it.
Are you starting Rashid Shaheed going up against the Chiefs over them?
Let's not get nuts. It's not getting nuts. No.
You're starting him just.
I'm taking Tyreek Hill
over him and Waddle?
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Tyreek, Rashid, Jalen.
Okay. Deontay Johnson against Chicago.
Deontay. Although the matchup's not great, he's going to have volume.
I agree. Let's see. JSN going up against the Giants.
I guess JSN's due for a touchdown. Has the most receptions without a receiving touchdown this season so far. Oh, wow. That's a good question. I will take JSN. I don't feel good about that one. That one's tough. That one's hard.
It is. 2 more. Terry McLaurin going up against the Browns.
Give me Terry.
And then last one. If Malik Neighbors sits, are you starting Wan'Dale Robinson over both of them?
I'll be dead before that happens. I'll start Tyreek. I'll go Wan'Dale, and then I'll go Jalen.
I'm with you. All right, my wide receiver of the week is going to be Jordan Addison going up against the New York Jets. Addison was great in his first game back from injury. Had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving, added on 72 yards. But it's a really tough matchup going against New York. The one thing this defense is able to do is guard the pass, right? We're talking about a top 5 defense against opposing fantasy wide receivers, whether it's DJ Reed or Sauce, depending on how much he travels, if he travels at all, going up against Justin Jefferson. But this is going to be a tough matchup for Sam Darnold. And on the other side, it's mostly because you could run all over the Jets. And if you could run on the Jets, why would you pass the ball when you have Sauce, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, and them guys? So I think Aaron Jones could have a really good day. Of course, starting Justin Jefferson. But Jordan Addison this week is not someone I'm looking to flex.
It's funny you say that. I almost made Sam Darnold my sit of the week. The Jets just don't give up points to the quarterback position. To be fair, they have gone up against some weak competition. Will Levis, Bo Nix. Week 3, you guys played Jacoby Brissett. Week 1, you went up against Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy really didn't have to do much. So I still had to. I took that into consideration. Said, "Hey, Sam Darnold's been playing at a pretty different level. Let's see what he can do." But I definitely feel you're coming from with Jordan Addison. The Jets defense definitely has been pretty strong. But this is their first real test since week 1, and they failed last week. So we gotta see what they got going on.
Okay,
Now,
take home quiz.
yeah, no, damn, that's saying something. Now, my tight end start of the week. To a reminder, we're not doing tight end sits. You don't sit tight ends. You hope and pray for the best. My start is going to be Mr. Brock Bowers. After a down week where he goes and doesn't even, I don't think he had 20 receiving yards. This week, I still feel confident going up against the Denver Broncos. There's something that we have a weakness in. I would say it is the tight end position. We right now rank 16th in terms of points allowed. That's also because we aren't really facing over the top competition there. However, I still feel Brock Bowers in this matchup where, PS2 is going to be on Jacoby Myers. There's got to be someone that's going to get the ball from Gardner Minshew. And I see them, especially with the way that they've been playing him out of different formations, different ways of trying to get him the ball. I even saw him get ran on a tight end sweep. That's how much they're trying to get him the rock. So yeah, last week, 2 catches, 19 yards. I think he'll have a bounce back game going up against my Broncos.
My star of the week, tight end's going to be Jake Ferguson going up against the Pittsburgh
Love
Steelers.
that.
I think Ferguson's a borderline, if not locked, top 5 tight end rest of season. Travis Kelce, I think with the necessity more than anything, is over him. Trey McBride, but after that, it's a conversation with him, Brock Bowers, and a couple of other guys. He got injured in week 2, but week 3, 6 catches for 95 yards, 7 catches for 50 yards in week 4. And now Brandon Cooks is injured. He's going to miss this game. Possibility he misses multiple games as well with his injury. So Ferguson slots right in as the clear number 2 option. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, right, when you're on sleep or whatever, they have that red little tag because they have been good against opposing tight ends, but they also haven't really gone against teams that utilize tight ends. The most tight end heavy team would be Kyle Pitts in week 1, but as we know, Kyle Pitts sometimes is utilized, sometimes he gets zeros. So outside of that, they've gone up against teams, like the Colts and the Broncos, who just don't really incorporate tight ends in their offense, especially as much as the Dallas Cowboys. So if you have Jake Ferguson, start him. It's one of the stronger starts of the week.
Now, that's going to do it from us in terms of our starts and sits. We got a couple of minutes. We'll go to probably that 40-minute mark. If you guys have any start-sit questions, more than happy to answer them for you. I know we got a couple of here, so let's just go and pick out a couple. I saw Seabass.CT go and ask us, for sure. Thank you very much for reminding me of that. He goes and asks DJ Moore or Terry McLaurin. I almost thought about sitting DJ or making DJ Moore one of my sits this week. I understand going up against his old team. That's definitely something that would intrigue me to play him. But Shane Waldron has been horrendous for this offense, and especially DJ Moore. That's really why I don't love it. And Terry McLaurin going up against the Cleveland Browns, we've been seeing week by week Terry McLaurin get stronger and stronger with that connection with Jaden Daniels. To me, that's kind of my reasoning for going Terry.
I like both. I would start DJ Moore going up against the Panthers. I think both have pretty strong matchups, but this Panthers defense hasn't been able to stop anybody at any point during the season. I know Shane Waldron has been, he's been a terrorist, let's be honest here, but I do think it's a good spot for DJ to, have a touchdown, maybe 60, 70 yards.
Shout out to Fiji for the donation. Appreciate you, King. He asked Tucker Kraft removed at tight end. I know it's low. Listen, it's not that low. Tucker Kraft was one of my favorite plays coming into this week, going up against the Rams. He was one of my favorite waiver wire ads. Also spoke about him on my studs list when we did our Monday night breakdown. Give me Tucker Kraft pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I think I would also go Tucker Kraft. Pat Freiermuth has been pretty consistent, 4+ catches in every single game, but it hasn't turned into much of anything. Only one game as top 10 tight end. But yeah, Tucker Kraft in this offense, just a more high-powered offense right now. And we talked about the snaps, the routes run, especially in this past game. He was actually getting real looks, like the targets and snaps became something for once. So I would start Tucker Kraft in a good matchup.
Shout out to C3JJ. He asked T-Law or Danny Dimes. Now, I saw him earlier say he started Andy Dalton over Kirk Cousins. That's pretty brutal. I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence. Listen, he's my start of the week for a reason.
Yeah, I would start Trevor Lawrence too. Malik Neighbors is also possibly going to miss that game, and that makes it a lot easier.
Without Malik, I want nothing to do with Daniel Jones or the Giants. Big Scoot asks Cooper, Pickens, Juwan Jennings, Pittman. I'm assuming Tyreek Hill, either Tyreek Hill or Justice Hill. These are all receivers.
Probably Tyreek.
McConkey and Jacoby Myers start 3. Mooney was benched. That is tragic to hear. Now, I'm gonna say you have to start Juwan. Juwan going up against the Cardinals. I feel like that's a good matchup. This is muddy. Pittman going up against the Jaguars. I like that matchup, believe it or not. And then I'm gonna go with Pickens. I just feel like Pickens, although he hasn't been the strongest fantasy option, last week was pretty solid versus versus the Indianapolis Colts. I think I'm leaning Pickens in this situation.
Yeah, I think Jawan's a lock. He has Brock Purdy's trust right now. Man, if Joe Flacco's starting, I love Pittman, but Amari Cooper going up against Washington, like
that's a fact.
That's such a great start as well. So I mean, for me, it's between Cooper, Pickens, Jawan, and Pittman, with Jawan being like the absolute must start right now. Pick 2 of those 3. If it's Anthony Richardson, it makes my life a bit easier. I would go with those first 2 names. If it's Joe Flacco, it makes it a bit difficult. But I think I would go Amari Cooper and then George Pickens.
Yeah, I think I lean the exact same way. Cooper with Washington's an amazing matchup. Let's move on to let's get it. Start Roshan Johnson or Braylon Allen. I think I'm going Roshan just because they are playing the Carolina Panthers, and I think that's the only reason I need, truthfully.
Yeah, that's tough. Roshan does have the matchup. I think Braylon's a better player and probably is going to see more work, right? It's just tough because 2 weeks ago, right, they said Roshan's going to be the guy, and then DeAndre Swift goes out there and he gets all the carries, and Roshan's not utilized at all. I think I'd actually go Braylon Allen. I feel like you're guaranteed more work there.
Shout out to Magic Carp Curry. He asks, I badly need an RB2 to start this week off waivers. Here are my options: Tank Bigsby, Roshan Johnson, Emmanuel Wilson, Tyrone Tracy. Ooh, getting muddy. Tank Bigsby against the Colts. I don't hate it. I also don't hate Roshan Johnson versus Panthers like we just spoke about. Emmanuel Wilson, sneaky. I get that, but I think that this is finally Josh Jacobs' big week to take control. And then Tyrone Tracy, I think you need to see more before you feel a little bit confident in sending him as your RB2, especially going up against Seattle. I find myself going Tank Bigsby here. I feel like that's a little bit more of a upside play than Roshan, because Roshan does have the matchup, but Tank Bigsby has a good matchup. It's just that he has Travis Etienne in his way, and Travis Etienne is a little bit banged up coming into this one.
Yeah, we'll see. Of course, check with Devin Singletary. If Singletary ends up being out, then Tracy would be the start here. But assuming Singletary plays, I would start Bigsby, and Emmanuel Wilson would probably be my second option there.
Shout out to Sports Dude. Of course, we know who that is. Shout out to Big Chuck. He goes, pick 2, Dontavian, Javonte, and Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers has a really strong matchup against Cincinnati, but Javonte going up against the Raiders is very intriguing, especially after the game that he just had against the New York Jets. Maybe my bias is ringing. I think Javonte might be the play there.
Yeah, Wicks is a lock for me. Between Zay and Javonte, I think I lean Zay, because honestly, Javonte, I don't know what to think, because he was just so bad for the first 3 weeks, and then he looks great against the Jets. The Raiders defense is someone that I'm targeting. I think I'm probably going to start Javonte against Big Chuck this week, because I have no other choice. But I think Zay Flowers against Cincinnati is a pretty strong start.
I definitely get where you're coming from. Cincinnati gives up boatloads of points to the wide receiver, but the Raiders are giving up the 8th most points to fantasy running backs. And on top of it, you don't know what version you're going to get of Bo Nix. I feel like Javonte is definitely going to get some work. So that's kind of my logic behind it, but I get Zay Flowers too. Sports Dude, you boys are doing the Lord's work, and you're the GOAT for donating, because obviously you don't have to. But we appreciate it, Charles. You're the fucking GOAT. Fernando Benacomo, he goes and says, Okay. He says, when does Dells get oiled up? That's a good question for you. I'll let you answer after this. But do I sit Ayuk? And I'm going to say no to that, because they are playing the Cardinals, and he is due.
Subscribe to the Patreon. You'll see me lubed up. Oh, oiled up. Whoa.
Look, yo, you're nuts. Jesus Christ. All right. And the last one, I think I did see someone ask T. Higgins or Zay Flowers. Shout out to Ismael Romero. he says Higgins or Zay Flowers, and I'm going with Higgins. I'm sorry. I think that this is his blow-up week. I think that we see, especially because the last time they matched up, or last season when he did match up versus the Ravens, he did have a game where he did have 2 touchdowns. He's a mismatch for those corners. He's simply too big, too physical. And you again, maybe it's me thinking that these players are due, but Higgins is seeing target share. He's getting opportunity from Joe Burrow. And I think this is the game they finally put it all together.
Yeah, I'm with you. I start T. Higgins there.
All right, and listen, that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show. We appreciate those guys that did tune in. If you guys did make it all the way to the end of this video, like the video, it really does help us out. If you aren't already subscribed to the channel, come on. What are you doing? Subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you know we go live like nights like tonight. Know when we go and we drop our weekly Blitz content. Jackson McIntyre, shout out to him. He's been dropping his breakdowns on our page. They've been doing awesome. He just dropped his Jaden Daniels film. If you guys are film nerds, go ahead and tune into that. Riv Academy, he's been on it. He goes and he's dropping another video soon. That's what the rumor has it. So tune into Riv Academy. And, of course, Pick a Side Podcast. We are dropping our next episode, I believe, tomorrow night. I know we just dropped our Pick'ems episode today. But that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction. And we'll see you guys